Picture this scenario for a minute in your mind. You're sound asleep. It's the middle of the night. You wake up and the house next door to you is on fire. You hear a baby crying, so you break in, save the baby, but as firefighters head in, they discover the body of a popular teenager inside the bathroom. And you know what? A murder investigation soon begins. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me next for a Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps shortcut. I want to welcome everyone to a bonus feature here on the Crossing the Line feed. You know, I come across these stories all the time while researching books, TV series, and my iHeartMedia podcast, Paper Ghosts, in addition to the ideas that you send to me. A lot of them grab hold of me emotionally, especially the victim stories and the ordeal their families go through. And my empathetic nature is to want to cover all of them. Yet a good number of the cases, for myriad reasons, don't fit into the model for a more complete Crossing the Line episode. So I wanted to create a sub-platform to showcase some of those stories as well. And I just want to say thank you for supporting Crossing the Line, which has allowed me to produce this new expansion of the brand. Once or twice per month, what I'm going to do is present a 15 to 20-minute episode. And we're going to cover murder and missing person cases, of course, but also other interesting crimes I think you'll want to hear about. I've got a story coming up in a couple of weeks that is fascinating, to say the least. And it does not involve murder or a missing person. Most importantly, though, I think we're going to delve into these cases that give us a deeper understanding of the crimes and the scumbags who commit them. So these are going to be shorter episodes, you can listen to while folding laundry, while taking a walk, preparing dinner, and you just don't have time for a more complete episode on that day. Let's get right into this first one. It's like the week before Christmas, 1993, in Burton's Bridge, Illinois. And this is a very small hamlet way up in the eastern northern corner of the state. And the population here is like, one account I read is 230 people. Another claims 700 people. So the point being, Burton's Bridge is a tiny, unincorporated community. What's interesting about it is that the total area is only about 1/10 of a square mile, 77 acres. So I guess when we say everybody knows everybody, in this situation, it's not a cliche, it's a fact. 16-year-old Beth Bosworth lives in Crystal Lake, an actual town of which Burton's Bridge could be considered a part of. And this is a gorgeous area north of Chicago, not far from Lake Michigan. There's a bit of money. It's not too congested either, and has that small town feel to it. Back in 1993, over 30 years ago now, probably even more so. Beth Bosworth has this wholesome, all-American girl quality about her. Long dark hair, thick dark eyebrows, brown eyes, fair complexion, all set against what family says is her jovial, congenial nature. She's a good person. Everybody loves her. Since the 5th grade, attending a local Lutheran elementary school, Beth has gotten honor roll grades and spent her extracurricular time cheerleading. Lately, she's been working part-time at a local grocery store. But she also babysits a nephew for her 22-year-old sister, whom she lives with. And I'm going to put a picture of Beth Ann up on the show notes so you can see her. I'm going to do that, I think, with this new format. I think it's important we get a well-rounded view of these stories. During the early evening of December 18th, Beth is on the sidelines inside Central High School's gymnasium, along with her fellow cheerleaders, rallying the Central High Tigers basketball team. Beth's nephew, Cody, is just 17 months old, a baby essentially. He's a charmer, and Beth was more than happy to move in with her sister to help out, which is why she rushes out of the gymnasium after the game and heads home. Her sister is going out that night. It's close to 10 p.m. when Beth's boyfriend and another friend arrive at the house to hang out with Beth while she takes care of the boy. And those friends stay a few hours, and they're gone by midnight. At this time, I am assuming, I didn't see it in any of the documentation, but I'm assuming that Beth went to bed. Put Cody to bed earlier, she goes to bed. She has her own room in the house. As a freshman and sophomore, Beth Ann had already garnered the distinction of the squad leader on the cheerleading team and had become a popular, well-liked student among her peers. She is diligent, very pleasant, and responsible. Beth also taught Sunday school at the same Emmanuel Lutheran school where she spent her elementary years. It's about 4:45 a.m. A report comes in of a house on South Riverside Drive engulfed in flames. Before firefighters arrive, a neighbor, a 34-year-old woman who saw the flames and made the call, she runs out of her house after hearing the sounds of a baby crying coming from the backyard. And without even considering the danger, this neighbor ran toward those sounds. Closer to the back door, she can hear the sounds even clearer. And so what she does is kicks the door in. And there is Cody, Beth Ann's nephew, on the kitchen floor in his pajamas, covered in soot. But he's alive. As the flames lick up the walls around her, and she's almost overcome by the smoke, the neighbor grabs the child and gets him outside. You couldn't see, I didn't know which room was which, the neighbor later says. But I knew he was right there because I could hear him. This is the worst nightmare imaginable for anyone sound asleep, am I right? Waking up to a fire. I've been in the situation myself, not as dangerous, but the side of the house was on fire one night. And I could tell you that it's easy to lose track of all your senses very quickly because your brain is not registering what's actually happening. There's this fear and flight adrenaline kicking in. You want to get the hell out of there. So this woman here who runs toward the fire goes in the house, fighting off flames and smoke and can't even see, can hardly breathe, as a hero. She was able to cast all that aside and just follow the boy's screams. So Cody is okay, though he is shaken up, of course, and scared. Further inside, as firefighters work their way in, they find a young woman unresponsive. It's Beth. And what is strange about where they find her is this. Beth is on the bathroom floor with the door locked and barricaded. Why would Cody be out in the kitchen and Beth inside the bathroom with the door closed and locked? Sadly, Beth Ann cannot be revived and is pronounced dead at the scene. The entire reason Beth had moved in the previous summer was to help her sister with Cody after her sister and her husband had separated. This is beyond tragic. Law enforcement is under the impression that Beth died from smoke inhalation or being overcome by the flames, but after an autopsy, they get word back that Beth Ann had been stabbed to death and murdered before the fire had even started. Which, of course, leads everyone to believe the fire was actually a ruse to cover up Beth's murder. I need a favor. Please spread word about our show on social media and word of mouth, of course. And subscribe to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement. And this allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have written in and asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions truly help. I could not do this show without you. And that support, I must tell you, means everything to me personally. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each of you for listening. I mean this. You have a lot of choices out there, and I'm grateful you've landed on Crossing the Line. We can grow this show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it and bring you the content you want. If you go to crossingtheline.biz, mwilliamphelps.com, or look in the show notes, you can contact me to suggest cases or just say hello. Please look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol in my name, M. William Phelps. Let's take our only break here and come right back. The fire began in Beth's bedroom. Law enforcement learns right away as they sift through the ashes. But they cannot find an accelerant used to ignite the blaze, which again is very strange. Yet the most baffling question is, what motive would someone have to get into the house and, they find out, stab Beth to death? What's more, this is a very brutal murder. Some 30 stab wounds are discovered all over Beth's upper body. That is a frenzied attack. It's overkill. You hear me talk about overkill from time to time on this show. It requires a certain amount of internal rage. There are also defensive wounds found on Beth's hands. So she fought her attacker, and he became hysterical and angrier than he already was. And I'll just say that overkill is not a clinical term used by forensic profilers and psychologists. They defer to what's called a homicide injury scale. Overkill is more of a pop culture term. But in the studies conducted on murders where overkill is present, almost all of them have some type of sexual element, meaning that the motive behind the murder is likely rape. In these situations, the killer is unable to stop himself once he begins to stab the victim. Hence the extensive number of wounds. They also want to be absolutely certain the victim is dead. These types of murders also suggest that the killer and the victim know each other in some capacity. In Beth's case, law enforcement comes right out and says nobody has been ruled out as a suspect. The reason why Beth was found inside the bathroom with the door locked is because she was trying to get away from her attacker. She was just a wonderful young lady, Patricia Bosworth, Beth's mother, tells the local newspaper. I just wonder why. Who could do this to her? She was so good and so kind, it's hard to believe anybody could be so sick. Beth's pastor says that if parents ever wanted a dream child, Beth Ann was that child. By early 1994, law enforcement latches onto a suspect, a neighbor who lives nearly next door, Dale Kauk, a 39-year-old construction worker. By January 17th, a search warrant of his house is underway, and Kauk is taken into custody. Kauk had not been living in the neighborhood for long. He had just moved in with relatives, literally just across the street from where Beth Ann lived. This is significant, and law enforcement became interested right away in Kauk for this reason. It's no stretch to consider that he could have become infatuated with Beth by watching her. And that infatuation turned into obsession, which of course escalates into what? Stalking. To their credit, local law enforcement put together a 9-member detective squad task force almost immediately after learning Beth Ann had been murdered. And they worked that case day and night. When they started talking to Kauk, he made what they later said were incriminating statements. He put himself at the scene, one detective tells reporters. And here is a brilliant move by detectives that I just love. When they picked Kauk up, they drove him over to the cemetery where Beth Ann is buried and pointed to her tombstone. And that was when he looked down and started shaking, and his entire demeanor changed. Right there, in that moment, they knew they had their guy. They also found bloody fingerprints belonging to Kauk inside the bathroom on a windowsill in the house where Beth was murdered. He had served 2 years in prison in 1979 for attempted armed robbery and was arrested for the same crime years later. It is then learned that Beth Ann had been sexually assaulted before her death. She must have been terrified and trying desperately to protect her nephew. The crime is so shocking and deliberate and vile, the prosecutor announces his office will seek the death penalty. Good for him. This is such a tragic case. I mean, they all are. We know that. But to think a young girl could be murdered inside the home where she lives by some scumbag obsessing over her from across the street haunts everyone in town. Whenever I give lectures about serial killers, I tell all the females in the audience to always keep a can of Raid on hand in your home and know where it is. Raid can shoot a stream of dangerous chemicals 20 to 30 feet and give you the opportunity to get away. If you are a jogger or walker, I also suggest never take the same route twice. Always break up your routine. And obviously never wear earbuds. I am not blaming Beth Ann or saying, had she done any of this, the bastard next door would not have succeeded. I'm just putting it out there for your benefit because it came to mind. Kauk wound up pleading guilty and is given a natural life sentence without the possibility of parole. Interestingly, when detectives told him they had his bloody fingerprint lifted from the windowsill inside the house where Beth Ann was murdered, he says this, "I killed her. I killed that girl. I killed her because I couldn't get her out." So what he's saying is he tried to rescue Beth Ann from the fire, which was total bullshit, and they knew it. She had been stabbed in the head, neck, and torso. And fibers taken from a Swiss Army knife they found inside the house Kauk lived in matched fibers from Beth Ann's clothing. I'm not sure why these guys think they can get away with what they do, and part of me really believes they don't even consider this when they decide to act on their rage and sexual deviancy. A criminal like Kauk will always reoffend. It's in his nature to commit crimes. He belongs in prison for life. The sad consequence is that Beth Ann's family and neighbors have to pay the price for his pathetic existence for the rest of their lives. There's no getting over this type of tragedy. It instead becomes about learning how to live with the pain. That's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in to my first shortcut episode. Be safe, be aware, and be alert. Sources for this episode include Kauk enters guilty plea, The Northwest Herald, Mark Madler, May 7, 1994. Sexual attack linked to killing, The Northwest Herald, Mark Madler, February 4, 1994. Neighbor charged in slaying, The Northwest Herald, Rich Carter and Amy Mack, January 17, 1994. Fingerprints led to suspect in slaying, Chicago Tribune, staff report, January 18, 1994. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.